Hi, everybody. And you know that I started off by interviewing a whole group of people, and I haven't done it for ages. But today I've got a treat for you because I'd love to introduce you to Sue Tobin. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, I'm going to just press a button here because we've got an interference on the recording. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you've got an interference.
Yeah, I've got leave meeting or got it.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, that's it. That's just quite normal. Yeah,
Oh, hold on. No, I'm sorry. This is me because I've been on. Right. I'm sorry.
don't apologize. Now,
Okay.
guys, I have to give you a little background story about Sue, and then we're going to get right into it. Sue was with me and the group in Egypt in October, November of 2023. And I hadn't met Sue, or so I thought, but Sue's sister had been in touch with me for about 2 years. I didn't know that Janice had a sister called Sue. And when Sue was busy chatting about her sister in Egypt, and consequently, her sister had passed away, and Sue had sent me a WhatsApp message when her sister passed away saying, "Hi, this is Sue. This is Janice's sister. Just to let you know that she's passed away." And I never knew Sue. Sue didn't know me. And a few months later, both of us were in Egypt meeting each other. It was just bizarre, incredible. What a story. So, Sue, you sent me your bio as such this morning, which totally blew me away. So, why don't you start in the beginning of being brought up in England
In
and
Wales, in
in,
Wales.
in Wales,
Yeah.
and, and and how it impacted you with your childhood with your mum?
Oh, yes. My dear mum. Actually, she was a treasure for me. You through the sufferings you can gain wisdom. That's all I can say. This lady is kind-hearted, but she had a severe mental problem. She was very psychotic, and it was undiagnosed. It was just that's what we looked at it like. Um, Also, it was difficult for her because she had severe anxiety. Probably the war didn't help.
Mm.
And so if we did something, there was two sisters and myself, if we did something like drop something, she'd go ballistic. And this was in the daytime. But in the nighttime, it got worse because she often used to come running after us in the daytime with whatever to give us a smack or a hit or whatever. And you just run out the way. I used to run out with my dog and hide in the bushes. Um, but in the nighttime, it got much worse. And I have heard of this like probably 10 years ago, one other person that went through the same, and they did call it a mental disorder, but I can't remember what it is now. But she used to live out her nightmares. So when we went to bed, we'd have about an hour, 2 hours sleep, and then you'd hear mum screaming. And then it went quiet, and then you hear the footsteps coming along the landing. And it was on a kind of creaky wooden board. And you think, is she going to go into my sister's room or is she coming into Jan and I's room? Because we had a twin bedded room. And you wait and you listen and you wait and you listen. And the next moment, you just close your eyes because you could see her coming in to the side. You could see her coming in. So you just think your eyes are closed so you won't get told off that you're not sleeping. But she's in a dream. So she's sleepwalking and living her nightmare.
Mm.
And sometimes when we woke up, we'd see her dark brown eyes that close to our eyes. And you just freeze so that you wouldn't move. Bit like a rabbit in headlights.
Mm.
And if you had moved, I think you would have been in trouble. because at one time I remember that there was slight movement and the hand went up as to kill me because thought she was under threat. And then you'd hear my father saying, "Come on, Bet," grabbing her hand, "come this way, come back to the bedroom." And sometimes she would go back calmly, and other times she'd fight him and try and kill him. And there'd be a terrible argument, and he was very cool and calm and would always end up leading her back to bed. But we didn't know when this was going to happen, on average about 3 times a week. So you didn't know when the nightmares were going to happen. But she was a terribly frightened soul, and she was afraid, I think, of being attacked. And so she was always dreaming she was being attacked or locked in. She had claustrophobia, so she could have been thinking, I'm in a cupboard. And, it got quite dangerous at times.
Must be
Because
exhausted.
yes, and it was. We used to go to school exhausted.
Yes.
And that was for 18 years. Nobody mentioned it in school. Nobody kind of, because families have their problems, but you don't talk about them. And bless her, she was a kind person underneath it all. And I realized this when I was 8 years of age. And one day I did something I'm trying to think now, it was in the dining room, dropped something and I thought, God, I hope it isn't broken. What isn't it broken? And thinking about this glass that had kind of gone over, it wasn't. It was fine. I put it back up, and I thought, that's fine. It's back on the table. And she heard and came in. Now I had a Sheltie sheepdog, and sheepdogs are very bright, very intelligent. And he always used to sit with me under the dining room table together, and he'd be shaking, waiting for her legs to come along around that dining room table. And then you'd see them going out again and out of the room looking for us. And as soon as they'd gone out, we'd run out from the dining room table and then go left and then into the kitchen. And then it's only a small semi, and then into what they call the lean-to then, and then into the garden. So we were free. But this one day she came after us. My dog used to run into the bushes. We had 2 sets of bushes we used to run into and hide. And he ran into one, and he's looking at me saying, "What are you doing? You're not with me. What are you doing?" I'm running out towards the back gate, and she'd be making pastry, and she came out with a rolling pin. She was really gonna go for it. And she was coming, I turned around, and then I stopped, and I didn't run anymore. I just turned around and faced her. And it was like a car crash, where everything slows down and you get into what I call, but didn't know then, the present time. And I saw something inside her, and it was hard to describe, but it was seeing this person and seeing the love inside of her. And it was almost kind of quite tearful looking at her, because she's so full of anger and so frightened, and she was coming at me full force. And I just stood there and looked at her. And then she came very close to me and then just stopped, swore her head off, and then turned around and went back. But it was something I saw inside her, think, this isn't her. This isn't her. This is her trauma. But I didn't know the word trauma then. I was only 8. And I looked at my dog. My dog's looking, what? What you doing? And you see him shaking in the bush. And I go, it's okay. It's okay now. And she still went through the same routine, but I saw her in a different light.
Wow, just incredible, hey?
So, sorry, go on.
And then you got through all those school years, you left school, you got married, you had children, you were married for 24 years.
Yes, yeah,
and then
quite a long time. Sometimes men decide that it's good to have an affair, which he did for 2 years. I didn't know. As someone much younger, he's a very intelligent guy, but he'd been through a bit of a hard time himself. And I think that you've got to understand where people are coming from. And if your path is going to change, it will change. It doesn't matter what you do, it will change. And so it's learning to accept. So it's learning about acceptance. And my concerns were for the children. There were 16 and 18 going, oh, sorry, 15 and 17 going through GCSEs and A levels. So it was a terrible time for them because they fully trusted him. Never thought this would happen to them. And so this is a learning. This is a learning. And even though you feel it's traumatic, because I had no job, I had no money, and I had to find 3 jobs. So I worked 70 hours a week for the first 3 years. Because as anything, even supermarkets were refusing me, which was getting a bit scary. Well, what else can I do? So I was a reflexologist as part-time work, but it's not guaranteed work. You could be booked up for 6 months, but there's sickness and there's cancellations, and it's not guaranteed, and certainly isn't enough money. So I became a carer. And I also then managed to join the palliative team with the NHS as a bank worker, just working when they need people. So I had the 3 jobs going. And the palliative care became my life, my love. Absolutely adored it. I knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't afford to be a nurse because I had 2 children, and it costs a lot of money to train for 3 years.
Mm.
So I did in-house training with the palliative team, and it was the love of my life. And that was it, so the doors were opening to go to different areas doing this work. But the beautiful thing is, about 6 months after not the divorce, but the separation, because my husband lived with us for 6 months, I joined a meditation group. Now, I'd been interested in meditation before, but had been too terrified because my mother had found out it's not Church of England or Catholic or that poor monk. It wouldn't have been worth his life living. So I decided not to do it then. And I was about 14 then. But I joined this meditation group later on. And they said, we're going, but about 6 months later, then they said, we're going up to India to take Tibetan refugees food, not food, but items and clothes, and give pens and paper and whatever to the children in the Himalayas. Come with us. And I said, oh, that would be my dream, but I'm sorry, I've got no money, I just can't do it. And lo and behold, before they left, about a couple of months before, they'd got together, put in the money, enough for a ticket for me to go to India. And that was the start of my new life.
Mm.
So when we went out there, I had monks coming to me, approaching me, and the rest of the group going, what is it with you and monks? What is it? And I said, I just don't know. I don't know. And I'd find myself wandering off and then going to a market. And then a young monk would speak to me and said, would you like a lemon juice? And I said, oh, you speak English. And he said, yes. And I said, so why are you in the market? Oh, I'm getting 20 cabbages, 20 cauliflowers. And he went through this huge number of veg that he has to collect once a week for the monastery. And it was an enormous amount, but they put everything into a taxi. And then he goes back to the monastery. And he said, come and join me in the monastery. Come and see the monastery. And I said, where is it? Because this is in the Himalayas. I have no idea where I am. And he explained that it's towards Dehradun. And I said, okay. So how do we get there? Do we go in the taxi? Oh, no, monks aren't allowed to go in the taxi. No. We go on the bus.
Oh.
We go on the bus. So we went on the local bus, and that is a story in itself. Full of chickens, little pigs, and all sorts of animals, as well as people layered on top of one another with the chicken on the basket at the top.
Yes.
And the other younger guys are hanging by the side of the bus. and it's chock-a-block. The monk gets on the front, that's his privilege. So they move away so that the monk can get in. I have to be a local person getting in at the back. And I'm thinking, there's absolutely no room. But bless them, they looked at me and they started layering higher and found a place where I could sit on someone. And then I found I had a chicken on my lap and then a little piggy by the side. And it was just like, you couldn't describe the scene. The smell was terrible because of the animals and the heat. But they were smiling and I'd smiled to them and you felt as if you were in with a family. You know, it's an incredible experience. And it reminded it reminded me of Crocodile Dundee, because when we eventually stopped, because we did about 3 or 4 stops, and I'm thinking these people can't get on, surely. And they do. They got on, and this lady came on with a chicken, and they laid up higher again. And I moved up higher, and then she came along and sat next to me on someone else, and then handed me another chicken. And my chicken had to go somewhere else. So we eventually get to the stop about half an hour later. And I can't see the monk anymore. I'm lost in
So you don't even
people.
know when you're going to get off or how you're going to get off.
Absolutely no idea. And then it's kind of the monk is giving the signal down the front. So it's a bit like the Crocodile at
Say
Dundee.
hello
All
to.
saying, she's there, tell her, all telling her to move back, look, there she is. And I said, okay, good, out, yes. And then I went to his monastery and met the senior monk there, had a long chat to him about life. I loved it there. I loved his compassion. And oh my gosh, you know, I just felt I was home again. So the higher monk said to me, well, you've got friends. Would you like to bring them up tomorrow and come to see me and we can all chat again? And I said, that'd be brilliant if they want to come, because they don't know I'm here. And the stories continue. So they eventually met up with him. To cut it short, I said to him, the senior monk, would you be my teacher? And normally teachers always say, of course I would. And he hesitated and he said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. And I said, and he was just oozing with compassion. The whole monastery loved him. And okay, that's fine. He said, but I think I have another teacher for you. Oh, right, okay. And it ends up the back and forth. I went back to England and to Wales, and there was all this kind of back and forth with communications, sometimes not, as in India. And it ended up that he wanted me to be under the guidance of his master, who is the abbot of the monastery, and that's His Holiness Sakya-Trizin, who is one of the Dalai Lama's teachers. And I went,
Wow.
are you sure? I am very sure. And bless him, 4 months later he died, and
This
he'd
new
had liver.
teacher or the one that you had
the,
met at the
the
monastery?
younger one, not the abbot, the younger one that had refused me as being a teacher. You know, he couldn't be my teacher,
Mm.
and that was the reason. He had liver cancer.
Oh, and he knew that
Um,
and he didn't let you know.
correct, yeah.
Okay.
So apparently, when I spoke to the monastery, he died in a samadhi state, so he had a control of his death. He was a very advanced Lama,
Mm.
and so they were all there witnessing it. Such a treasure to meet such a soul, you know. So then His Holiness gave me teachings. He used to come to the UK, actually, to Reading, but nobody knew this, and to a Nepalese family, and he'd have a shrine room at the top, and he'd come over once or twice a year, and ended up having, you know, large or big or high, whatever we're trying to say, whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, they're initiations. And these initiations are quite complex sometimes. And you have to the Lama or the abbot has to know that you can cope with them because of the energies you're dealing with. So I was very lucky enough to have these big initiations, and that was it really. That was my start. You know, I became a Buddhist, and I loved the work. I loved the practices which you have to do. It's a big commitment. You have to do them every day for the rest of your life. But there was also a monastery in Scotland, so I used to pop up there now and again in my leave when I wasn't working, and had
So sorry, in between all this, you were still working at palliative care.
Yes, because I'd always go to India or go to the monasteries or any retreat in my leave time. So every time I had a holiday,
Annual leave or whatever. Yeah.
I'd be up in Scotland or India. And in Scotland, there's some very, very good teachers that came across from Tibet. And Trungpa Rinpoche was another very high Lama who's passed away probably about 18 months ago now. And I was just very lucky having these teachers, you know, that were, they weren't just teaching you, they were teaching others. And sometimes there were private situations too, where you could speak to them and have other teachings. But I was just so lucky, you know, meeting these people. And my journeys just continued in India, working in palliative care, working in a leprosy mission, working in Mother Teresa's, working on the base of the Himalayas with a doctor where you'd see a queue of several hundred people. We'd be just sitting in a chair, the doctor and I, and there'd be several hundred people, and they'd travel for days to come and see the doctor. And you know, we wouldn't be able to see them all. We knew that. So you might get through about an eighth of the queue, you know, there all day. And he was an excellent doctor because they have a different way of looking at you. They look at your eyes, they look at your nails, they look at, you know, your skin rather than I'm suffering from this, that, and the other. So he was very quick at kind of assessing. And then he'd guide them to places and say, over there's a desk, they'll help you. They'll tell you where to go, where to get help, where the nearest hospital is. But it's all the hundreds that you leave behind, the children, the sick children. They're taking days to get to us. And this wonderful doctor, being a volunteer himself, would go up about once a month. But you think you really see poor people and the traveling they have to do to see one doctor. They may or may not see. So what learnings, you know, what sufferings. But my life became, it's all palliative, but it's also to do with grief. Excuse me. So I trained as a cruise counselor and a Samaritan, and that enabled me to go out to the end of the war in Sarajevo to counsel people, the victims from the concentration camps as well, poor souls. Anywhere where I think I could help. And it wasn't an attachment of, I have to do this now, I have to do this, you know, I have to keep myself busy, I have to. It was a dedication, you know, it was a true love for it.
And it just unfolded, Sue.
Yes.
Your path just unfolding in front of you.
Yes. And it was this direction, that
direction, amazing how it was, everybody was helping you. Those people with that meditation
started
on your way.
Yes, I would never have gone otherwise. I've never gone to India because I wouldn't
how
be able
different
to.
Your life could have been.
Yes. But I mean, I was going back to India and traveling on my own then. You know, I was in my late 40s, 50s. And so I'd be traveling throughout the night through India, just getting an old taxi. I mean, some of the stories are really funny, I have to say. It's not all bad news or all depressing because it's palliative, because it's grief. So yeah, I mean, I was taking a risk really,
And
because
then
you
what
can't.
happened? Because you still did so much more.
Um, yeah, so what happened? Um, yes, it just all accelerated into, um, I kept going back 7 times. I went back to India. Um, 5 of those was working. 2 of those was traveling with a friend, and we just used to have spiritual things happening to us. My friend who's very dedicated to her practice, which is the SRF, um, she said, "Why don't we go and do this? Why don't we go and do that?" And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And so she was leading me, and she was unaware that she was leading me, but she'd be leading me to these places. And at one time, I have to go back a bit now. Um, I decided to give up. I'm jumping now a little bit because I'll come back to that. Um, I decided to give up the NHS for a year and go into a jungle. This is totally crazy. I was meant to go for this one gap year to go and work with palliative patients in a forest in Thailand with a team. But when I got there and I'd given up my job and everything, that wasn't to happen because there were some political issues going on. So, oh, right. And so the company that was looking after me there said, we'll wait and see what happens. And then a couple of weeks later, this work came up that nobody would go and work in this jungle with AIDS patients. Um, they were in the jungle because they had no money. They were street people. So they had full-blown AIDS, and that's children as well.
So they were
They were 8
dying,
miles.
living in the jungle with no phones
No,
or anything and nobody to care for them or look after them.
no, except
And,
for a
it,
caretaker.
and then along came Florence Nightingale.
No. So a caretaker was there a couple of hours a day because it was his land and they were living there. So he used to keep an eye on the place. Um, and I said, okay, we'll do this. We'll do that. We'll go ahead and do it. And I was just kind of 8 miles inside of the jungle. And I guess I am a little crazy,
Was he
but I
accommodated?
accommodate. Um,
Where did you
well,
sleep?
it was okay because they were concrete rooms for the patients who were mobile, and I had a concrete room. It was small. I had a toilet, a hole in the ground, basically, with a kind of basic toilet on top. And what else they had? Oh, I had a tap that was in the side of the wall, but very low, about 2 foot high. You couldn't have a shower with that, but that's where my water would come through. So I just used to fill 6 buckets a day up. I walk down the hill and then walk all the way up again, my buckets every day, so I can have a wash and then, wash myself. But these people were interesting because they were street people, so they were tough. They were really tough people, and they thought, "What's she doing here?" And they'd never seen. It's like they'd never seen a European before, which was interesting. Um, I sat on the bench when I first went there. I sat on the bench, and 2 of these ladies, well, 3 of these ladies came along, and one was the leader. She was a big lady, and they sat next to me, and I knew there would be some kind of initiation. I knew there has to be an acceptance here somewhere. Are they going to accept me or not? And I was just sitting there, and I was chatting to them, but I couldn't. I couldn't speak a word of Thai, so they were laughing and giggling, um, and then all of a sudden, the big lady got hold of my shirt like this and looked inside, and I went, "Yes, it's the same as yours, the same." And then she just laughed. And the next thing is that they put something on my chest. And I thought, hmm. So they were still laughing, and I didn't react. And I just closed my eyes as if it was nothing. It's probably not. If it's, they're laughing, it can't be dangerous, whatever it is, because they put it there. And then I could hear this hissing noise, this loud hissing noise. And they were laughing again and laughing again. And I opened my eyes, and it was the biggest cockroach I've ever seen in my life, because in the jungle, animals are bigger than normal.
Mm.
And they'd stuck it onto my chest. So they were frightening it by hitting it, and it was hissing. And what it done, it grabbed its legs into my chest. And I thought, oh, the poor soul. So I tried to get it off, and I couldn't, because it was locked in. It was locked. So it's probably terrified. And the big lady came along and just grabbed it and threw it on the floor. But what they didn't realize, they'd left the legs inside my skin. So the body had come off, but the legs are still in there, which made them even more hysterical then, because they thought everything was funny. And I just pulled each leg out. And I went, oh, it's a shame, really. And just pulled each little leg out. And that was they accepted me then, and that was okay. That was the initiation.
They were trying to scare you in some kind of way, or sort of see what you
Yeah,
meant.
someone had tried, a German couple had tried before, but only lasted 2 weeks, because it's a rough game they play. It's rough. And so I won't go into details, because there's a lot that went on in the jungle. You've got the animals as a challenge, and they're dangerous.
Like what
So
animals are they?
well, we had a huge snake, brown and black. I used to know where he lived by the hut, and there were huts for doing the cooking. And I knew where he lived, so that's okay. That was a good sign. Always looked out for him. But he became more active in the monsoon. And other animals like iguana. Now, iguanas are very, very beautiful animals, but in the jungle, they're quite large, and they're green and pink and most glorious colors you could ever imagine. Big, big round eyes. And in Thailand, they used to tame them, so tourists think they're quite friendly. Um, and one was lying sideways and in front of my doorway. It was a kind of porch, and so it hung out there. And so when I open my door, it's there. And if the mobile patient saw that there, that they were saying that. And I said, Puna, what's the matter? Because I was basic Thai is terrible, but I could learn certain words and ask why. And oh, because you will die. Oh, and they were talking about the web feet, and they jump on you, adhere to you, stuck, and then slit your throat. So they're
Oh,
the nicest of animals. And we had a small temple. It was a ruin, but it was a small temple where we could go and do pujas, which are like Buddhist prayers in the nighttime. It'd be flooded if it was raining, but we'd still sit there in the water. And as we came out in the dark, the patients would be looking for this yugana, because it was so unsafe. So there was, there were just many things. I won't go into detail, because it kind of spoiled the rest of the kind of other stories. And so I'm going to jump now, because there are many stories in the stories, and life-threatening too. Um, so as I'm in the jungle, I'd been there about 4 months, and it was the evening time, and I always looked up at the sky, and I always looked up at the hills. And because from my room, you could see about, I'm guessing, 50 miles of treetops, because it was all jungle.
mm.
And as I'm kind of looking up, there was no one around. Everybody had settled down, and the ward was fine. I used to call it the ward. It was a room with the patients. They were fine. And the mobile people were fine too. They were sleeping. And I was just meandering around, just looking, just being present, just enjoying the moment of peace. And this presence came to me. Now, all I can say, you can't describe this, so I'm going to try hard here by saying, if you're sitting forward and someone comes behind you, you know they're there. You have a
Yes.
feeling someone's behind you. I had that in front of me, and it was just kind of, you keep kind of thinking and looking around, like, I can't see anything, something's there. And this presence came to me. And it was like a telepathic thought. And the thought was, now I'm a Buddhist, and I always wanted to be a Tibetan Buddhist. I don't know why, but I'd met these Tibetan monks all through India when I traveled, and I really wanted to be a Tibetan nun, but I could not see it. I could not believe it was going to happen yet, or whatever. At this moment, it wasn't going to happen. So this telepathic message said, you are to be a nun. And I'm going, you're confused now because you're in a jungle. And I said, a nun? Yes, you are to be a nun. I can't think of the exact words because this is crazy things. I thought, this is crazy things that are happening to me. Maybe I'm losing it. Maybe I am going crazy with the heat and the people and the trauma and everything else that's going on. You are to be a nun. You are to show other monks and nuns how to work with the dying. And I thought, I have lost the plot. And then I said, well, who are you anyway? And I'm thinking, if I have to be a nun, I have to be a Thai nun. And then I started getting cross. And I thought, no, no, this isn't, no, I am going crazy. No, this is not right. And so I said, well, who are you? No answer. Never gave me another answer. And then as I'm kind of walking along my little corridor, the path to my room, I'm thinking, what on earth happened? And then I thought, I could be a nun. Why not be a nun? I think it'd be a really good idea, this, because there's so many monks and nuns and your mind. So someone's convinced, something is convincing you it is the right thing to do. And it was, because you think of the monks and nuns throughout Thailand, and I'd spoken to abbots before, and they can't get the monks and nuns to work with the dying. Abbots work with the dying. They can sit with the body for 40 days, 40 nights. But monks and nuns are too scared.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity. So by the morning, I was convinced I was going to do it. And then I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? This isn't an easy job. How can you just suddenly say I'm going to be a nun? And I remembered, before I went into the jungle, I had a week off and I was touring around, and I went into Wat Arun, which is a famous monastery in Thailand on the river. And it is the most beautiful monastery. It's got steeple spires made out of Chinese porcelain pieces. And I thought, I'd love to go there. So I went by boat, crossed over and went across to the monastery. And I loved it there. It was a small monastery. It was a beautiful monastery. It was the king's monastery. So I decided to have a lie down on the grass and just look at these steeples. They were amazing. And the second to the abbot came to me. The abbot was very old then, so there was secondary kind of high monk that was in charge. And he came over to me and had a little chat. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I'm making my way down to the jungle. And I explained, I was working with palliative care. And we had a little talk. And as he left, he just turned and he said, maybe you'd like to be a nun one day. So the penny dropped. That's where I need to go. And that's what I did. And it was 12 hours back up into Bangkok from the jungle. I told the parishioners I would be back. It would take a couple of weeks. I didn't explain anything because I couldn't do it anyway because I didn't have the language. I will be back. I will. And I said, I will bring jip is pain. So jip is a Thai word for pain, which is similar to the English word, of course. And I said, my jip cream, Kung Su buy cream for you? You know, oh, it's good, good, good. Because we had no
Oh,
medication. So I went to Otteroon. I spoke to Longpo and I said, do you remember what you said to me? And he said, I remember. And I said, I want to ordain. And I told him the reasons why. And he said, good. A couple of days later, he came back to me and said, we have one obstacle. I have to ask the king's permission first. Because you are intending of going to go back down in the jungle as a nun. And nuns have to be in nunneries. Monks have to be in monasteries. They're not allowed to wander around the streets doing what they want to do.
oh.
So we had the permission from the king, and providing I had a carer, that when I was ordained, that she came down to me to the jungle to make sure I slept on the floor. I ate one meal a day, because it took us 2 days to go down there again after I had ordained. And as soon as we got into the jungle, I'm bye. She said, bye, I'm not staying here. My. And I said, okay, that's good. That's okay. And then I was ordained in the jungle then as a nun. And it really did have its benefits. And the story goes on. I can't even describe some of them because they're very emotional. I mean, some of those patients died in a lot of pain, horrendous pain. I mean, one guy, the caretaker and his sign language and what I was saying were waiting for the liver to burst. He had TB and he had AIDS. He was only in his 20s. We didn't have the right medication. He was lucky enough to have someone living next door to him, because actually he was not in the ward, but in one of the mobile little rooms like mine. And he was sleeping there. And next door to that was another patient about the same age. And these are street people, so they're tough. I can't explain how tough they are, but I have written about it. And I think it's better that people read about it rather than explain, because it's quite horrific sometimes. But it's a
So
street.
you put this all in your book, Sue.
Yes.
So
But of
what is
course,
the book called?
the book is called Grief, Sufferings and Transitions, because within grief, we all have grief. We all will go through some kind of grief. What people look at as grief is major events, when someone dies or something awful happens. But actually, when you look at grief, you're grieving nearly every week. You lose your bracelet, you lose your hair, you lose this, you lose that. And you, oh, I wish I had, I wish I had. And you kind of have these mini grieving moments, but people don't realize that. So grief is a big part of your life. And what grief can do is give you the greatest learnings, because yes, you go through the sufferings. And then you should question, why am I suffering so much? And you can find the answers. And once you can see what's happening, the transition is just fantastic, because
know,
it's now accepting your life is going to change. The
and
path is changing.
I'm so glad you've said that, because when I had my whole spiritual awakening, I just couldn't be the old Jill anymore.
Yeah.
But I lost lots of old friends because I
And
just
you,
play the game. And I always said it was like lots of little heart attacks,
yes,
meaning an attack of the heart, of the pain of letting go. And then
yes.
another one, and then another one, and then another one, you know, and it was a
They
letting,
go
it
on
was the
smaller.
grief, the grief, and the grief.
Yes.
And then you come out of the other side, because at some stage you've got to say, I live, who do I live for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Correct.
then carry on.
So
So
then
then
you
I,
accepted, you had
I
a new
understand.
path,
Yeah,
because you had to lose you as well, part of you, because you changed.
I
So you
definitely changed.
So you're going through different grieving moments.
Mm.
And I always look at grief as kind of like troughs where they're very deep, they're very high, they're very deep. And then they get smaller, and then they get smaller, and then it will surprise you and go very deep again. And you're in the trauma. But there's great learnings in the sufferings. It sounds the strangest things to say, but there are great learnings if you're willing to accept. If you don't accept, you can be stuck there, grieving, wanting that person back. And does that person want you grieving? So we have a question there. It's a great subject, and it's not, you know, people don't like the thought of it because of the pain and everything, and you get used to people living with you, your relatives. But we're all on this journey, and we meet different people, and we learn from each other, or we can learn from each other, whether they're nasty to you, whether they're loving to you. And that's a whole another subject as well. What is love? So we won't go into that one. That's really quite complicated. So yes, it's the grief. The book is about grief because even in the jungle, you know, I had this awareness. But this guy was young and he'd scream day and night, every hour, because he hadn't got the medication. He was coughing up a lot of blood. He had TB. And the children are really very good at accepting. They used to come to me and say, wow, 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 like a dance, because it was their way of coping with it. And you could hear him echoing around the jungle, because I was higher up on the hill and it just used to echo in the nighttime it would die down to smaller screams and then a moan and then a bit of quietness. And you think, oh, has he gone? Oh, I hope so. And then he'd scream again. And so it became traumatic that this went on for a couple of weeks, not days. And my ego got the best of me. And I remember walking past his room and looking at his friend who was cleaning up all the blood again, saying, I'm looking after him. You're not to come in. It's AIDS, TB. He was going, TB, AIDS, because AIDS is AIDS in Thailand. And I said, I know, thank you, but I can help. Chule means help. My, you die. So I used to talk to him through the window. It was a kind of shutter, wooden shutter. And I talked to him and see what he was doing. And you'd see more and more blood on that floor. And I just think, how much longer will he be? And he was in absolute agony. And then I just kind of I walked away. And I thought, because we had a monastery 8 kilometers away who's in charge of the hospice. And if someone dies, they pick up the body and they will cremate it and put it in a sack. And then there would be a big pile of these sacks in the monastery of unclaimed bodies, unclaimed dust, because families wouldn't go near it because it was AIDS. And I just kind of lost the plot for a moment and just said, I have to go and see Longpo. I have to get out of this jungle. We have to get medication. This cannot go on for a human being to go through this pain. And then all of a sudden I stop and I think, what are you talking about? And then I hear the caretaker shouting, you will die if you go, because the animals will kill you. You will die. And I said, I know. I'm coming back. I just went into total ego. And which is okay, because you can see what you're doing. This is part of your life. There's nothing you can do, and it's learning to accept again. So I turned around, walked past his room, heard his screams again, carried on walking, went back to the ward. And he lasted still several days, screaming terribly. And I can only imagine he lost most of his blood before he died, because I've never seen so much blood on that floor. And you're talking about street people, and they did pretty nasty things to each other, I have to say. It wasn't pleasant to watch, but I wasn't going to interfere. And the children suffered as well at times, but there were street people. I was there to help them when they were passing over. And so there's a lot of acceptance in that jungle. And it's incredible, really, that, you know, there is so much suffering that goes on. And it was quite, it's a strange thing to say, but it was such a great learning, you know, that all life is about acceptance, and your ego can't control situations as much as it wanted to. It can't control. What you
But how
can
did it
control.
affect you?
Sorry?
But how
How
did
did
it affect you?
Acceptance. It's the value of acceptance. It's not denial, you know, because I'd gone through the trauma. It's like, I'm going to do something, and you can't do it.
Mm.
So you just walk past and go back to the ward, and then something else would happen. One of the patients in the ward, which was an absolute treasure, an absolute privilege to be with this patient. But you've got to think, going back to the patient who was suffering, his friend, who we never knew before until he came into the hospice, he's a street person. He's just a basic street person. And he gave his life to his friend. You know, he was the warrior,
Mm.
you know, and that's something special to watch. Brilliant guy. Brilliant guy. And of course, the patient died in the end. And the children came running up to me first thing in the morning going, yay, and dancing, dancing. I can't hear anything. Die, 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 gone, Puchai. Boy, gone, died. And I started dancing with them, and I thought, now I have lost the plot. But I was
The
so elated.
celebration is not in pain anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, he was gone, he was out of pain, and his friend was still sweeping up everywhere.
Mm.
It was a horrendous, horrendous death. And no one should go through that. But it's a learning, you know, that's life. That's, you know, animals die in terrible ways, you know, in the wild. It's life and death, and it's all about acceptance. You try your best, and that's it.
And then we don't know how lucky we are in the Western world,
Yeah,
how absolutely privileged we are
yeah.
when we
Because
hear
when
that.
I went there, you know, there was no blankets, there were no sheets. There was one pillow. It'd been there for 15 years, never been washed. And when someone died, oh, beg your pardon, we had one blanket. And we had old clothes when people had died. They were washed and then put in a small cupboard and then could be reused from the person who died.
Mm.
But we had a blanket that someone must have brought in. And when the two boys from the monastery, they were just workmen, came with a truck, they put, you know, the body on a kind of, I suppose it's just a carrier, like a carrier to put the, that's all I can say. And they went to put the blanket on top, and I was going, my, don't take it, please don't take it, please don't take it. It's our only blanket. And they gave it back to me, and then he went off without a blanket. But we were desperate. We're absolutely dead. That blanket was for the person who was actually dying, who only had a couple of days to live.
Some comfort. And then what happened after that? How long did you stay there for?
Almost a year.
And then what happened? Where did you go after that?
Well, after that, I went back to Bangkok, and I wanted to learn about walking meditation. So Long Po, who was the abbot there, guided me and sent me to another monastery. beautiful little monastery, supported by these village people who are so dedicated to the monks and nuns. And they'd saved up enough money, there'd been enough donations to make a beautiful temple. And in return, the monks there would have a kind of walking meditation at 4 in the morning. And I would guess, because I couldn't speak the language properly, at least 25%, 30% of the village people would come 4 o'clock in the morning. And the elderly would come with their tripods. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd all stand in lines, about 4 or 5 lines in the long temple, beautiful floor, and do walking meditation, which is actually very different to our meditation. To do walking meditation, it takes 8 steps, movements with 1 foot in 1 minute. So you're lifting up the ankle, then lifting up the toe, lifting up the knee. And so this is why they need the tripods. Monks and nuns have taught themselves you don't need the tripods, but and then you take 8 parts to 1 step, which takes about a minute. And if when you're trying to balance, you wobble, it's because the thought has come in. And when I was training with 2 monks, I had 1 senior and 1 junior, and they'd be standing by the side of me. We go up and down this temple floor, and there was a big fan going, and you've only got to think that fan's going to knock me over, and you wobble. You just will wobble. And the little tap on the shoulder, or the little tap on the leg with a stick will be telling me you just had a thought. And they were the most wonderful monks there, and nuns too. And wasn't it fantastic that this senior monk used to be a consultant in a big Bangkok hospital? That was like music to my ears, because he spoke English, and I told him what I wanted. I wanted to try and encourage more monks and nuns to work with the dying. Can he help me? And he did. He made an appointment with a psychologist in the big hospital. And we took a younger monk as well. And I said, I want you to see what happens to these AIDS patients. And there were 3 floors full of AIDS patients. Nobody would go and see them. Nobody would go near them. No relatives. They were just under their sheets, hiding, just kind of like an animal thing, just waiting to die. And the 4 of us approached these wards, and the psychologist and the senior monk waited at the end. And I said, I'm taking the monk with me, because I want him to be with the males, and I will be with the female patients, because they're all in the same ward, but they'll be opposite sides. And I said, I want you to see what happens. So all we did was sat down on the seat right next to the beds. Now all these people are covered, and for curiosity's sake, they're kind of looking and seeing what's going on. And then they see the robes, and they can't believe that someone cares, that someone's come to see them. And they start kind of rising out from behind the sheets and smiling. When did the smile last, I wonder? I looked at the monk and I said, put your hand on the bed. And he's terrified because it's AIDS. But AIDS, it's very difficult. You've got to have, it's fluid contact. So it's semen or it's blood, and it's got to be live, it's contact. So it's quite difficult to get it. I said, you'll be okay. Put your hand on the bed. He put the hand in the bed, and they just were smiling. And of course, the monk could talk to them, of course, because he's Thai. And then I said, put your hand on their hand. And he's kind of looking at me, put the hand on the hand. So put the hand on the hand. And they were just delighted that we accepted them.
Human touch.
And yes, and the senior monk and the psychologist were looking, and I just turned to them and I went, And they
So
went,
simple. Yeah, so simple.
so simple. So they agreed then, the psychologist then said, we promise we will have monks and nuns here to come and visit the patients once a month. And you think, once a month? But that's a
Wow.
start. It's a
Wow.
seed sown, you know, to get this going, that monks and nuns would enjoy this as well. You know, they'd realize there's no need to be scared.
And then when did you leave the jungle? What was the next step?
Well, that was leaving the jungle and went back to this other monastery, which then led us to the hospital in Bangkok. And I stayed in this monastery only for about a couple of weeks. It's just happening so quickly, all this. And my time was up, I was about to leave, and it was very difficult. I wanted to stay as a nun, but I had a family at home, and you have responsibility. So when Longpo said, my name was Palitar then, and he said, Palitar, when you're ready, we will do the disrobing. You will not be a nun. Yes, I know Longpo. I used to talk to Longpo every day, and we used to have, you know, great discussions every day. So he knew me quite well. He knew I didn't want to give up my robes.
Yeah.
And that day I was flying in the night, and it said after lunch, remember now, Palitar, come to me when you want to do this. I will. Then it came 4 o'clock, and he walked past and he said, Palitar, we're going to have to do this. I know that. um, so in the end, I had to disrobe, and it was pretty heartbreaking, but you had to do it. But before that, the day before this, I must go back because there's stories within stories. And before that, the last day, Longpo was a PhD guy, and he was a lecturer in the university teaching philosophy. And a friend of his was a nun who was also a PhD, and she was doing the same thing. And he said, we have this nun, and she's asked me, because you're going home tomorrow, would you like to go to a nunnery up in another forestry up North Bangkok? And I said, oh, it'd be great, it'd be lovely. So we went on the bus, and it was 4 hours journey, and we got to this nunnery in the forest. And there were, I think, 10 Thai young girls, beautiful, all in white, were lined up either side with the village people and the nuns welcoming us to back into the nunnery. And the bus drove in, and we got out, and they put on a big feast for us. The local people had made this beautiful food, and making a big fuss of me and of the nun, because she was the head of the nunnery. And it was just beautiful. They had a meditation hut up in the trees, and two of the young girls showed me around. Lovely, beautiful, beautiful children. And I said, you know, to the nun, I said, why are the children here? Why are the girls here? And she said, oh, they're all orphans. We take them in, and we teach them how to live a good life. And it works very well. And the village people support them too. Um, that's wonderful. So we went back into the bus and went back home, and everybody was arming as we were leaving and thanking us. And I said, that was so kind of you. It was such a beautiful, beautiful nunnery. And then she dropped the bombshell and turned around and said, I'd like you to run the nunnery. I have spoken to Longpo and he's agreed. And I went, I'm going home tomorrow. So it couldn't happen. It couldn't happen. If I hadn't got responsibilities in the UK, that would have been fine. It would have been great to have taught these, you know, that you were saying, everybody loved you there, the village people loved you, and the girls wanted you there. And you could teach them English and then teach them philosophy. And you have a monastery not far away. They would supply you with anything you wanted. And I could concentrate more on being in the lectures then in the university, because this is 4 hours away from where she worked. And it had already been agreed by Longpo. I didn't know, but unfortunately it couldn't happen. So it was quite a tear, you know, having to leave Bangkok. but that's the way it is. You have to go through these emotions. You have to
Journey,
accept.
little mini journeys. And then back
Yeah.
home, did everything change?
Went back. Well, when I went back, my brother-in-law was seriously ill, so I nursed him with my sister. Then my mother became sick, and I nursed her. But it's funny, isn't it? Because my sisters couldn't accept what my mother was like. They could be with her in the same room when she's dying, but they couldn't touch her. You know, they still lived the trauma of what they went through. Um, but I was just gifted with that awareness, and I could see she's not this person. She doesn't want to be this person. She's a very frightened person, and she had a lot of love. And but she went very, considering she had so many anxieties, she went very peacefully, very peacefully. It was fantastic to be with her. And then after that, I went back into the palliative team
At the
and
NHS?
in the NHS, and carried on with Crews and Samaritans, and trips back and forth to India, still working in India, Mother Teresa's and different areas. And then, you know, life changes again, and my job changed, and I was very, very fortunate to have managers that would let me go on like 3 weeks leave, or you know, because you're supposed to have 2 weeks and then 2 weeks or 1 week, and one of the managers let me have 4 weeks, and therefore I could go and spend a longer time in India. But then another manager came along and didn't allow really for me to work with charities. And this isn't good or bad. This isn't kind of looking at a person saying, why not? This is for other people. It's just the way it is. The path was changing. And so a lot of the back and forth to India had to stop. And I worked in a hospice now and again, a wonderful hospice in Wales called Scandervale, and it's run by monks and nuns, and it's the most glorious hospice I've ever worked in. Those monks and nuns work very hard to give all their time to dying people and also rescuing animals, because they live on the mountain in Wales. They had this enormous amount of land with all these animals they'd rescued, included 2 elephants. And even in the snow, those elephants have to be walked like 5 hours a day. So this is an easy job for the monks. So they had Australian animals. They had all sorts of animals they'd rescued, just all sorts, from birds to swans to horses to goats, everything you could think of, cows, as
And
well as
then
palliative.
how did you then get to the position where you are now, and that you came to Egypt? And how did,
Yes, how did that happen?
yeah.
My sister, who was a very healthy person, had a very good diet, and she used to walk a lot, and she was 2 years older than me, sorry, 4 years older than me, suddenly came down with cancer at the end of COVID. And then she had COVID and died pretty quickly. And it was quite shocking because she was just a healthy person. And we were quite close. And about 18 months later, she started contacting me in the night. And I'm not psychic, and I'm not a medium like you brilliant people are. I'm not. I didn't think there's always some part of you that is, but you know, I wasn't channeled into that. And I'd hear Sue, Sue, about 3 in the morning, happy, not unhappy, but calling me and calling me, and it'd be about 3 times a week for about 6 weeks. And I thought, she can't hear me because I have to be able to do something. And I went to one medium that wanted me to go on a course and try and learn. I thought, no, this doesn't sound right. This isn't right. I have to try and find a quicker answer. Someone mentioned the Ascended Masters. And I thought, I had heard of them, and I started looking online. and I found Michelle with the Council of Eight. Now I must try, and they would tell me what's going on. And so I made an appointment and went to see them. And their words were, "Welcome, Sue, we've been waiting for you." Right. And they knew about my sister, and yes, she was part of the plan. And she was waiting in a station to be reincarnated. And they wanted me to go to Scotland. I went, "Scotland? To the rocks?" To the rocks? And I felt this journey was coming upon me again. And yes, you go to the rocks and there will be a massive awakening. And I thought, I came here about my sister. Yes. And so where do I go in? I don't know Scotland. You know, I've been there a couple of times to a monastery there, a lovely monastery, which is completely the opposite side that they wanted me to go to an island. Didn't mention a name, just said where the rocks are. And all I could think of was the islands where there's lots of rocks in Scotland. And they said, "Oh, Spirit will join you in Edinburgh." So I thought, right, I'm 70 and I'm going up to the rocks because the Ascended Masters are sending me there. I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. So I thought, well, you just go with trust and arrange the journey on the train. And then I thought, I'll go with a group of people, you know, a little tiny van, about 16 people, going up to the Inner Hebrides, to isolated islands. And I thought, that sounds good. I might as well enjoy myself. So I ended up going on this bus. It was a really interesting tour. And we ended up on an island on the Inner Hebrides, and we had to cross over waters and like boats and different things. And there was an old monastery and nunnery from the 8th century, and had been rebuilt and rebuilt, and now had been completely rebuilt except for the nunnery side. And this island, I didn't know, had 65 kings buried on this island. So that is telling you something.
Wow.
So I'm approaching this island, and I thought, I can't wait to get into that church and that monastery. It looks fantastic because this is a small island. It's not a bigger, and I'm thinking, where are these people buried? They're all facing apparently the same direction. And they have the original crosses there, huge stone crosses from the 8th century. And there was a little tiny room with a shrine next to the church. And I went into the church and I had severe backache. I came down with severe backache and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get back. You know, we got to catch the last boat back before the bus is picking us up. And I just don't know how I'm going to get down that hill. So the person who had lived there in the 8th century was Saint Columba, and he was a very well-known monk who performed miracles. And they have a kind of made-up statue in the church, but they still had the original stone feet. The rest was all modern, like wired into a person. So it was very contemporary. And I just put my hands on the feet and I said, if you can just help my back, you know, for me to get home, because it is now really bad. And I went and slowly walked over to the chairs and sat and did a meditation in pain, but in meditation. And then came out from the meditation, thought, oh, I've got to go because of the boat. I've got to go. And then walked towards the archway door and thought, my back is still killing me. I'm still bent over like an old woman. And I get to the arch door and I open it. And as I step out, the back is perfect. No pain. So on the side, I see this little room. I'm looking at the boats and they haven't started loading the people yet. So I go into this little room and just go and say, thank you. Thank you to St. Columba for what you've done. I only asked to get home with this back. remember this. And so anyway, yes, we I was sitting there, I did a meditation and thanked them and thanked whoever was around for letting me be there, for having the permission for being there, for giving me pain relief. And this massive awakening happened, and I cannot describe this. I cannot. Because once you try to explain these spiritual experiences, you lose the meaning, you lose the essence. The nearest is that I saw the world in a different place, you know, and completely different to what I was used to. So it's like everything opened up. The trees, the sea, everything seemed to be talking to, everything seemed to be coming alive, which sounds ridiculous, but that's probably not what was quite happening, but that's how it seemed to be. And I was just in this blissful state, complete, blissful, connected state. And I thought, oh, you're trying to be normal, thinking the boats, the boats. So I go out and my feet won't run. My feet won't run. And I'm seeing the people being loaded and they're quite away from me. I have to go all through these lanes, have no sense of direction, as you found out. I have no sense of direction. And I thought, I've got to get there. And then my feet started to work again. They started to work. That's good. That's good. But I was still in this blissful state. And eventually walked down the lanes and then I saw a big queue of people and I saw my party were on board already and the boat was about to leave full and they couldn't get the other passengers on. My feet just accelerated, really went fast. And I said to the attendant there, I'm with the party, I'm with the party. And they let me on. And then the boat lifted up and left the other passengers behind. I kept saying, so sorry to the passengers. I was running past them because they're probably thinking, she can't go on. We can't go on. So that's what happened. And I was trying to be normal in this blissful state as much as you could, trying to converse with people, but also keeping to the side of it just to not look so abnormal.
Wow, absolutely incredible. And then you had another session with
I went
Michelle
back, yes.
when they said about Egypt.
Yes, I went back to thank them. I said, that was just incredible. I'm not sure why I had that, but it was, I understand what it is. And they were laughing, they were cheering. And then they said, no, Sue, we want you to write a book. I went, what? I can't write a book. We want you to write a book on grief, sufferings, and transitions. Your life has been about grief, sufferings, transitions. Yes, but when I was 4, this is another side story. I went to the school, a primary school. It was quite rough, and I was quite timid. And I remember being in class, and in break time, you had a bottled milk outside in the play area. But before you could go, you had to read flashcards, what I'd never been taught to read at all. And I couldn't read them. So the class would go out and read their little kind of and it flashcards, and I couldn't. And I was left-handed. So the teacher couldn't understand why I couldn't read. And I said, I just can't read. So I was kept in. I was never allowed to go and get my milk. And then one day she said to me, it's because you're left-handed. Your brain's on the wrong side and you won't ever learn to read. Now, this is a long time ago. This is a long time ago. So that conditioning stayed with me. I hated English. I hated if I had to speak in front of a class when I was a teenager, because I couldn't read like other people could read. And that stayed with me a long time until one day I picked up a book called The Dove. And it was about a 16-year-old who sailed around the world on his own and the traumas he went through. And I was so into this book, and I thought, I've just read a book. I've just read a book. I could read. I could read a book. I knew I could read. I didn't think I could read a book. And now the masters are saying, write a book. You've got to write a book. And I think, oh, perhaps I could get a ghostwriter. But no, I had to write the book. So I thought I sat with this for some time, and then they said, "Oh, Michelle doesn't know this yet, but she's getting a group of people going to Egypt." Oh yes, and they said, "You like old buildings, Sung. I love architecture. I love old buildings." And yes, I do, but I have no interest in Egypt. But you like old buildings. Yes, I do like old buildings. And you've heard of Ra? No, I haven't heard of Ra. And you've heard of Horace? No, I haven't heard of Horace. Because I'm honest with them. I just say, no, I don't know these people. Who are they? Are they gods? And but you will know. You will know. Um, Michelle will let you know when there's a group being formed. Michelle doesn't know this, they said. So, of course, yes, the group was formed. And I didn't have enough money to go. And so I thought, I can't go. I can't go and do this. And so when Michelle was bringing the group together, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm supposed to be going, but I can't go. So I'll just have to leave it. And then something happened where there was an automatic typing going on. I was taken to my phone and I was typing away to Michelle. And I thought, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And because email went off just to ask if there was a place left. It was quite late now. And was there a place left? Michelle came back very quickly, said, there's one place left. And I'm thinking, I haven't got the money. And accept. And I thought, is someone else doing this? And then I thought, okay, we'll see if I can get some money. And of course, funny enough, my funds came in for the electricity from the government as £500, which paid for shamefully for the flight and not for so I've cut down a lot on my heating to pay for the flight. But going back to the book, I started to sit down and I thought I'll just jot some notes. And obviously I had some help because I wrote that book, 58,000 words in 6.5 weeks. So that is totally off the wall for me. I just continued. I just continued. I just continued. I continued. I'd eat and I'd go and help the family next door. And then I'd continued and continued. And I'd sometimes go to 3 a.m. until I was going on my computer in 6.5 weeks. And that's how I wrote it.
That is so exciting. So now when are you going to launch it? So what happens now?
Well, the thing is that it's being edited. It's coming to the end, so that it will soon hopefully come out if the masters want this. They said it is very, very necessary for people to read this book. And all they said to me, you have to speak up. You have to say, read this book. And they went to me, and I've been told to do this, saying, read this book. 2 people, which I've done, and not to necessarily buy it, but read it, learn about the sufferings, learn about acceptance. I can't tell you. I mean, once you know what to do, it takes you out of the sufferings. It teaches you about compassion.
Sorry, I didn't even know that was on.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
Sorry.
it teaches you about compassion, because that's my deepest love. And to have compassion is amazingly deep. And you can't do it until you learn to have compassion for yourself. That is the first learning. And then you can give to others. Because being kind is lovely, being kind is beautiful. Compassion is very deep. And it's like giving yourself to people. So it's learning about compassion. And hence why I took the Bodhisattva vow, which is dedicating your life to compassion. But when you take this vow, you are kind of checked. You know how serious this is. This is not just for this lifetime. It's for all lifetimes.
But you know,
So,
Sue, you don't even know that by being in Egypt, the gift that you gave me, because when Michelle and I let everybody go through the Sekhmet temple before we went through, and the messages that I received from Sekhmet. But when we got back to the hotel that night, Michelle and I were sitting on the edge of my bed, and we had an interleading room. So her room was this side, my room was that side, both with en suites, and an archway between us that was open. And I said to her, somebody's just walked into your bathroom.
Yes.
She said, who? And I said, I don't know. She said, well, ask. I said, oh my gosh, it's Sekhmet. And then she said, oh, what does Sekhmet want? I said, I don't know. She says, Jill, ask. And then Sekhmet started speaking to me and said, you have the Queen of Compassion with you, Sue. Now, I didn't know your story. I didn't know that you'd taken this vow of compassion or anything, and neither did Michelle. I immediately then said to Michelle, oh, do you think I really saw Sekhmet? Do you think, am I just making this up?
Yes,
and then the very next day, she said to me, guess what? Guess what? I spoke to Sue, and did you know she took a vow of compassion? So, Jill, there's your proof that, yes, you were receiving information. Yes, you are connected. So do you see how none of us do this alone?
No, it's all the plan. It's all, yes.
It's just so beautifully orchestrated.
And what I learned from last night from the meeting is that so many people had connections with Ra. Now, the Ascended Masters told me about Ra and kept mentioning Ra, and I said, I don't know who Ra is. I'm sorry, I don't know who Ra is. When we went to the first pyramid in the morning, I was standing outside and Ra started pulsating all through me, all the time. Ra, 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 and stayed with me and still is with me the whole time. I didn't know what was happening. I kept asking people, who is Ra? What is Ra? And I got from some people, it's the sun god. It's like, no, that's not right. That's not right. You might be a sun god, but it's not just that. I knew it was something more. What I didn't know was like, it's the universe. And what the Ascended Masters were trying to tell me. And then, of course, 3 days later, I meet with Sekhmet. Sekhmet? Is that right? And I was just standing in front. There didn't seem to be anybody apart from Dean, who I didn't know was behind me. And I was standing in front, I was doing this meditation, and the Ra was pulsating more and more and more, more and more. And I just went, and I don't know what happened. Then 2 Egyptian men got hold of my arms because Dean said I was swaying so much. He really thought I was going to drop. He really thought something was going to happen to me. So 2 Egyptian young men took my arms, and I can only vaguely remember this, being led into the next room, which was dark. And apparently they put my hands, standing up, leaning on the wall on 2 symbols, probably trying to ground me, which did happen in the end. But I think it did scare Dean a bit because he just thought I was going to drop. He just thought I was going to drop. But you see the connection of Ra, and I didn't know any of this, and Sekhmet, and the power. I can't tell you what was the result of that because I don't think it's appropriate at the moment. But the Ascended Master did confirm something with me. And all I can say is, the Ascended Masters are here to help us. I didn't know anything about Ascended Masters until my sister was trying to get hold of me. And all I can say is, look, for everyone out there, these beings are trying to help us. You know, if I hadn't gone to Michelle, if I hadn't gone to the Ascended Masters, I wouldn't have gone through these experiences.
I think, you just get led where you need to go at the time. I mean, that's all
It's
that's ever
possible,
happened to me, is
yes.
just being open to it and knowing that miracles happen every day. And if you think of what's happened in your life, how it's just evolved,
Yes.
it's like, it's so exciting, because if that's already happened, what's next?
Yes.
No?
What?
Right?
And
What's
I'm willing.
next?
It's all, my life has been about acceptance. I'm willing to risk, because even when you learn about meditation, when you really learn about meditation, meditation makes you feel safe. That's it. And this is kind of learning to trust and learning to accept. And this is why grief became so important, because it's all of these things: learning to accept, learning to move forward, learning to trust yourself. Go out and step into the fear. It's okay. It's as it is.
Well,
I've
I
been,
think we're going to, well, Susie, we're going to need a follow-up. So what we're going to do is, I mean, I could just talk to you forever, but unfortunately, I've got an appointment to
I
go
know,
to. So
I
what we're
know.
going to do
You.
is keep people informed, and you're
Yeah.
going to let me know when it launches, and we'll get you back so that they can see it and know where to get it.
Yes, that's right. Because it's for them. You know, I have written this for them because the Ascended Masters wants this out, knowing it will be helpful to people. And all they kept saying, tap on the book, Sue, tap on the book. Not to buy. I'm not saying buy, because I'm not a person that comes forward and said, you must buy this book. It's really good. No, tap on the book. It's to be read. It's to be read. If one person buys one, hand it round to other people. That's what they're telling me. And how I
Fantastic.
wrote it, I don't know, but I'm very grateful to them. Um, please, people, take note. These beings are to help you. They were once on this earth themselves. They know what suffering is about, and then they became enlightened. But they know how difficult it is for us. They have an understanding, and they're there for us to try and help.
And if people want to get to know them, I will leave the details under this interview, this chat, so that
Yes,
they can go on a Monday morning. I think that's the Sunday for America. And then they can just connect with the Ascended Masters and Michelle. She has a group every Monday morning.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you know, there's a lot of suffering at the moment, a lot more than we've been through. We've been through wars and everything. We're going through more wars, but there's a lot more other sufferings going on. And it's been a blessing to have a life that I've had, because I've had my sufferings, but they're all okay. There's something to learn from. And even
Wow.
though the body and the mind and the ego is going, woe is me, as many people are saying, it's not things are done to you, they're done for you. Look at the learnings.
And it's always in hindsight, you can see that.
Mm. It's
So I would just like to say thank you,
You're
because I
welcome.
was riveted. I was riveted. And I could sit here, as I said, all day. Wow. I mean, just those few stories. I can't imagine all the rest in the book. So I'm definitely going to get that. And I think once I've read it, I'll donate it to our library
That would be lovely.
so
That'd be
that
wonderful.
the library can have it and then everybody can read it.
Because that's what's needed for people. Can't always afford books, and and the other thing that's important is that we all have a story. We all have a story. I would love to read other people's stories of their lives. You're not just a nobody. We're on this
Exactly.
life and we are all important. And I'd love to read your story. So think about writing your own story. Think how wonderful that would be that you could read everybody's story, your stories, neighbor stories, whatever. They're all different. How wonderful that would be.
Every single one is different. And when I gave Michelle a reading about 3 years ago, it actually said that we need to work together and
Yes.
create a platform for people's stories.
Oh, and that's what
So,
um the Ascended Masters are, as you know, want me heard. And as you know, in Egypt, I lost my voice, but we won't go into that one. But that was deliberate because I'm quite a reserved person and just help where I can. I can speak up when need be, as I had to be strong in the jungle and stand up for myself. But I have to be really heard now. I have to go out there and say, look, you know, let's support one another. Let's be kind to one another. Let's learn about compassion. That is the number one for me, because if we're all compassionate to one another, we have an understanding. We have an understanding of love as not being in love. Love is a
no.
different.
And as you say that, with the compassion, I immediately saw almost like a torus field or like a web where there's strength.
A lot of strength. It's very deep, but it's true love. We think we know what love is. Love is quite a complex subject when we're in love or we love. And it's learning to have love without being attached to anything. You are love. You are the compassion.
Well, it's like anything, people have to learn to accept themselves and love themselves before they could love anything else.
And also not judge themselves, and then they don't judge others.
Yes, that's right. My guide said the more you love yourself, the less you find that's wrong in another.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Now
Brilliant.
I've got
Thank
to go, but
Yes.
thank you so much.
You.
And let's get this out and let people start knowing about you. So, guys, there you go. You got to meet Sue today, and isn't she absolutely fascinating? So, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. And let me know if you've got any questions for Sue or if you'd like to know about Michelle. Lots and lots of love. All the best. Cheers. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.